My brother slammed his glass on the table and laughed about his new job, and that's when my stomach churned. I didn't know why yet. I just knew something was wrong. Everyone was applauding him, saying he was smart, while I sat there unnoticed, listening to the nonsensical numbers being rattled off. What I didn't see then was how deep the lie had gone. That night, I opened my laptop and followed a trail no one bothered to look at. Calculations that turned inward. Promises that defied basic mathematics. My brother wasn't rising, he was being positioned. He was being used. I wanted to warn them. I wish I had spoken sooner. But by the time I understood what was really happening, it was too late to walk away, and someone had noticed I was watching. I stood at the corner of the table, my hands holding a jug of cold water. I watched the secretary pacing back and forth in the room, clenching and unclenching her fists in fear. It meant Draven was boiling over. Draven Mitchell, my father, never spoke to me properly. There were orders. There were criticisms. But there was never any change of heart. Today was no different. His arrival felt like a red accessory, a tag that symbolized control. "Sophie, make the tea," she murmured, ignoring me. "The atmosphere needs to be calm before the participants arrive." Marcus, who was sitting in the office chair next to me, looked up and smiled at me. That smile, a meaningful smile, had always made me uneasy. The kind of smile you see between people sharing a secret. Marcus's life was brilliant. Like a star player, as soon as he graduated from university, my father immediately assigned him a bodyguard role in the company. He was in charge of all marketing operations, bonuses, access to elite clubs, long vacations. It was all for Marcus. Meanwhile, I, despite 5 years of university education, was just an assistant in the accounting department, stuck in a shed. Or rather, that's how I seemed to be. Real story was very different. But nobody knew. I stood at the edge of the table, seemingly carefully watching the water flow into the glass. But in reality, I was observing far more important things. I noticed Draven's hand was trembling. His tie buckle lacked a proper knot. It had a cheap clip. There was a protruding seam on the right shoulder of his dark suit. These are signs, to those who know, that the money is missing. Until 3 years ago, Draven Mitchell was a well-known figure in the finance and real estate sectors. He was very successful. He was very wealthy. He was highly respected. However, the last 3 years had been a period of his greed and reckless investing. From lawyer to lawyer, consulted debt manager to debt manager, specially conditioned loans, consolidation of his small debts, and finally the risky and last resort. Draven's new board member was an investment group called Investment Company. Its president was a very attractive, very shrewd woman named Victoria Ashford. The investment company claimed to offer high-yield short-term returns. Its real name was a more elegant version of the Ponzi scheme. Draven wanted to solve this situation by bringing Marcus into the partnership. The investment firm was looking for young, passionate, and naive partners. Marcus fit that description perfectly. The initial investment required $200,000. Draven didn't have that money, but he had told Marcus that this venture would change his life. Marcus had written a check from her own savings, from relatives' money borrowed from her mother, and finally, as collateral for our father's house. I was checking the books. I was reviewing the accounts. I knew the truth. 5 years ago, when I first started working at the company as a junior accountant, I realized something very simple. The key to ownership, power and control isn't money. It's knowledge. From the outside, Sophie Hendricks is the almost invisible assistant, her daughter, and someone who has stayed in the cabin.
In reality, I'm an investigator, an asset cleaner.
Bad debts, bankrupt companies, emerging crises, that's my specialty. For the past 3 years, working outside of work, I've built up a debt fund, my own. Most of Draven's debts ended up in my file. Draven's board of directors, and I'm the chairman. But none of them knew. Draven's face turned pale when the name of Thomas Blackwell, Victoria Ashford's assistant, was announced in the office. Thomas was a man of sharp suits, calm, and possessed a bitter compassion. He was Victoria's right-hand man. "Mr. Draven," said Thomas, sitting down without taking a glass of water. "Tell him Victoria sent me to arrive a little early. I want to review the terms of attendance." Draven smiled, but the smile was empty. Sure. Sophie, could you bring me some water?" I raised the water jug. Bartol, perhaps a premonition, a feeling, or just habit. My eyes met his as I filled Thomas's glass. A familiar look. Control and waiting. He was a part of me, one of the few people who understood that. Sophie, Thomas said quietly, are the human resources documents ready at this stage of the procedure? Before the participants are approved. Draven frowned. Why are you asking about the documents? Standard procedure, Thomas said, shrugging his shoulders. Victoria wants everything to be done according to the rules, especially for new partners. Draven skipped that moment, a brief hesitation, but enough. Had our request for the documents, made him realize the power on the side of what was right. Sophie, Draven said quickly, go to the Human Resources office. Bring all the documents. I needed to discipline myself to keep from grinning as I walked to the Human Resources office. Everything was going according to plan. When I emerged from the archive, my hands held 9 folders and a flash drive. These documents contained concrete evidence of Draven's complete misrepresentation of debts, Marcus's manipulation of bank statements, and Victoria's, i.e., guardian launch of a new Ponzi scheme. When I left it aside in the office, Thomas opened the envelope to examine it. He quickly scanned it with his eyes. After a minute or two, Thomas looked up. Marcus's bank statements, she said in a low voice. There's a reference to additional funds. Where to? Draven didn't speak, but his face seemed to be losing its expression. The credit limit has been exceeded, Thomas said, placing the document on the table. The difference between receivables and payables is marked. $200,000 from sources that never existed. She looked at Marcus. My brother suddenly looked so small. This is a despicable fraud, said Thomas, rising from his desk. And I must report this to Victoria. Wait, said Draven. We can fix it. If you can fix it, you can talk to Victoria later, Thomas said. But without this money, the participation won't be approved. It's a real shame. Your social influence at the investment company would have been fantastic. Draven's face seemed completely lost. Marcus was shocked and frightened. They really hadn't been able to do this. The banks wanted proof of the new money. They wanted real money. They wanted the funds and the details. This office is a place devoid of compassion and mercy. Thomas stood up and carefully examined the envelope. He added it to his portfolio. Maybe you can find another investment opportunity. One that's more realistic. He left without saying a word. When his leg touched the door, I spoke after him. Wait, she said quietly. There's another option. Thomas stopped. Draven looked up. Marcus, on the other hand, looked at me as if he didn't know what to do. Option A, I continued very carefully. You send real money to the investors. But you don't have any. You can't get into the investment company. Marcus's life doesn't change. The houses disappear, and it remains outside the law. Draven's hands trembled. Marcus started to tremble. Option B, I continued very calmly. You work with me. I've consolidated your debts. We have financial resources. I can provide real money. You join Marcus Investment Company, legitimately, but what? Said Draven, his voice choked with punishment and fear. But you'll give me your house, he said. To me. Silence filled the room. It was as if the air had taken root. Marcus stood up. Sophie, what did you say? Give me the house, I explained, keeping my eyes open. The house you don't own in your wallet. We'll take care of the paperwork. The house is mine. I'm financing Marcus's move into the investment company. And you can continue living here. You'll live in my house and I'll pay your rent. Draven shouted. This house, it's not easy. It's not easy, I began to explain. Because the house is already in a 30-year crisis. Debts, mortgages, personal debt, a house that gets older every day. But for me, the beginning is just the beginning. Marcus glared at me angrily. Draven was running away, his eyes fixed on the table. Marcus asked, Why are you doing this? For a moment I was speechless, because the answer was complex. Why would a family turn a daughter into the Avenger, the one who takes the money in the house? Why would someone want their daughter to be an accountant, yet make her invisible? Because, I replied, as long as you treat me like that, I will treat you like that too. The invisible, the silent, the insignificant. But in reality, I have become the most powerful. And the one who controls the power always has the last word. Draven was on the verge of tears. Marcus's face turned deathly pale with anguish and terror. Sign it, I said, tossing a pen and documents onto the table. Draven's bank account deed, the transfer of property records, everything. Or, I continued, tell Thomas everything. Write a federal fraud charge. Marcus gets 15 years. The house is seized. There's nothing left. Draven, without moving, picked up his pen. I saw his hand tremble. He signed 4 pages, With the signature, the 30-year control came to an end. The house was mine now. I was responsible for everything, including the financial details. Marcus's path, however, led him to an investment company pursuing his personal interests. But legitimately, with real money, my money, Draven sat there not knowing what to say, just staring at the table. Thomas returned. He picked up the envelope. He checked the documents. He looked up. Is it under discussion? It was discussed, I said. Thomas nodded. Then he left. This time he didn't come back. Marcus was still frozen, staring at me. What did you do? I did justice, I said. I reclaimed our father's investment. Your power is gone, and I finally have begun to possess. When I walked out of his office, Draven was behind us, slumped in his chair, looking completely out of shape. As I walked down the hall, my phone vibrated. A message from Thomas. We confirmed his position at the investment firm within 24 hours. Marcus's funding sources were found to be correct. The participation has been approved. Congratulations, Chairman, Minister. No one knew it, but I had now become the true owner, hidden in the shadows. Initially, no one asked questions. Unasked questions hung in the air. This made progress superficial. There was no depth to the discussion. Because there was no depth, the truth remained hidden. These hidden truths eventually created problems. These problems weren't immediately apparent. They manifested themselves through indirect effects. Relationships became strained. Communication weakened. This weakness increased misunderstandings. Misunderstandings created new distances. These distances slowed the process down. The slowdown became inevitable, and progress almost came to a standstill. 6 months later, I sat in the most prestigious office of the investment firm. My glass desk was located on one of the highest floors in the city. Below were millions of people, but I was up there, the observer, the controller, the waiter. Marcus's life at the investment company had been bright and exciting in the first 3 months. He saw himself as an investment genius. Luxury restaurants, exclusive clubs, nice people. Draven, thanks to his daughter's my financial backing, was living comfortably at home. I paid the bill every month. A happy system for them. Ponzi scheme owned by Victoria Ashford. 3 months ago, a file landed in my debt fund. Victoria Ashford, having been behind a similar scam 5 years earlier, had been reborn in the financial world. Similar methods, similar paychecks, similar math. But the difference was this. I wasn't just another participant in his game. I became the owner of his game. Thomas gave me the news. He sat down at the presentation table and opened a tablet on which he had prepared a presentation. Victoria's accounts, Thomas said, turning the screen towards me. Real returns, fictitious transactions, and the actual placement of investor funds. The screen displayed colorful graphs and charts. Most pointed to private banks in the Bahamas and shady dealings in Liechtenstein. The investment firm has over $500 million in investor money, I said, reading out the numbers. Its actual return is 8%. Its advertised return is 25%. Absolutely, said Thomas. The difference was used to fill the pockets of Victoria and her partners. Where is Marcus's investment? I asked. The investment, company's written accounts show 100%. Security and periodic profits, Thomas said. But the actual funds, missing. Transferred to Victoria's personal accounts. For a moment I was speechless. Marcus's money, some of mine, would be in Victoria's pocket, and neither of them would know. What do you want to do? Thomas asked. The map filled my mind. A plan. Mine. Do we know when Victoria's next investor call is? I asked. Tomorrow night, Thomas said. A private event. High net worth attendees. They're probably expecting $50 million in new signings. I need to go to the meeting, I said. Thomas raised his eyebrows. Sophie, if Victoria knows you, no one recognizes me, I interrupted. My whole life spent as an invisible girl has been an advantage. No one recognizes me. No one sees me. When tomorrow night arrived, I transformed myself. I went from invisibility to brilliance. A black dress, diamond earrings, and most importantly, a fake identity. Alessandra Montes is an investor based in London with a portfolio worth $300 million. A private penthouse, separate from the investment firm's office. The entrance fee was $50,000 per person. The tickets were paid for with my funds. Victoria Ashford was naturally brilliant. Seductive, elegant, and utterly dangerous. She spoke in a crosshairs, explaining her money charts while people drank chocolate and champagne. His oral presentation included graphs of the investment, companies' returns from previous years. All the numbers are lies. All the promises are false. But the story is appealing and believable. Marcus was there too. He was standing by the window, but he looked somewhat serious. Perhaps his first doubts had begun. Perhaps in a moment when he wasn't preoccupied with spending the money, he had come face to face with reality. Victoria saw me. She approached me. She was interested in my information, and Victoria, perhaps unaware of the nature of her watches, or perhaps overconfident, told me a little too much. "Alessandra," he whispered, pulling her from one corner to another. "It's simple. The investors bring the money, I manage it. The real profit, the actual profit, goes into my and my partner's pockets. The rest of the people just want to see the numbers. Show them the numbers. They'll be happy." He said it. I witnessed it. My phone was in my pocket, recording. "Really?" I said, putting on that stubborn, naive act. "Really?" said Victoria, laughing. "But I want to tell you a secret. There's a secret at the heart of the investment company. The company's engineering was founded by Thomas Blackwell. He's my partner. He controls everything. He manages the paperwork, the accounts, everything. Trust him, and you'll succeed in life." My heart started racing. Thomas? Thomas Blackwell? Victoria's partner? At the end of the night, I left the office. I needed to go see Thomas. In Thomas's apartment, the ceiling was high, offering an open view of New York. When he opened the door, Thomas's expression changed. "Did Victoria send you?" she asked quickly. "No," I said. "But he likes you a lot. He said you're his partner." Thomas's face turned white. Then he sat down. "I," he said slowly, "am a police officer. Federal family. I've been investigating the investment company for 2 years." Silence. The air stood still as if frozen. "I'm not Victoria's partner," Thomas said. "I'm not someone who tried to reject her, or someone who knew her through police intelligence. I was someone who tried to protect you. I needed to understand." "Why me?" "Because," Thomas said, examining my eyes, "whatever you're doing, it's wrong. Buying Draven's house, manipulating Marcus's money, getting him into the investment company. It's all illegal. And I have the power to arrest you, but I haven't, because I need you." I stood up, furious. "What do you mean?" "I mean," said Thomas, standing up, "to shut down Victoria's entire operation. I need to trace Victoria's entire chain of money and documents. Your debt fund, your accounts, your company, they have deeper access than I do. Help me, let's catch Victoria. The investment company, we'll close it. And then, maybe there will be some space. Perhaps for you." "Maybe?" I repeated. "Maybe? Thomas, am I a criminal?" "No," said Thomas. "But you engaged in unfaithful financial transactions. You used forged documents. You didn't commit fraud, but you crossed the line. You have a choice. Work with me, or I'll finish the job and include you in the equation." I thought about it. Choices aren't always simple. Was I going to be a girl seeking revenge on Draven, or someone trying to protect an investor fund? "Okay," I said. "But there's one condition." "What is it?" asked Thomas. "You're going to protect Marcus's money. His real money. You're going to get it back from the investment company. No questions asked." Thomas hesitated. "That would be difficult." "Or," I said, "I'll go to Victoria and tell her you're a cop. And I'll tell her to choose how to end this." Thomas nodded. "Okay, I'll protect Marcus." Our collaboration began. I provided Thomas with access to his police, and he provided the accounts. The communication deepened. Victoria's true assets, hidden accounts, and most importantly, the names of her partners began to be revealed. Investment company. She had 6 other partners. One held a high-ranking position in banking. Another was a tax inspector. The third was an international money carrier. There was a systemic corruptella. But the plan was simple. Drug Victoria. Lock her accounts, freeze her funds for that reason, and then obtain a witness statement. 2 weeks later, Thomas launched the operation. Police raided Victoria's office. Computers were locked. Documents were seized. Victoria was arrested. But the story doesn't end there. What happened wasn't based on a specific plan. Steps were taken according to immediate circumstances. This provided flexibility, but it also created instability. Without stability, direction was lost. Loss of direction created uncertainty. Uncertainty eroded trust. As trust decreased, risks increased. Risks were taken recklessly. These miscalculations affected the results. The results did not meet expectations. Disappointments arose. This lowered motivation. When motivation decreased, progress slowed. and the process collapsed under its own weight. 2 days later, when I returned home, Draven looked at me with a bewildered expression. "Sophie," she said, "what did she do to Marcus?" "I didn't do anything," I said. "Thomas did. Marcus left the investment company. He got all his money back. No questions asked. He even has a bonus, $200,000. Where is that coming from?" Responding made me uncomfortable. Reality is sometimes more complex than fiction. Marcus had truly been a victim. The investment companies, it's a story, an account of how he deceived people. And perhaps, rather than being driven to revenge, I wanted to see myself as someone who dispenses justice. "It's a federal operation," I told Draven. "They're shutting down the investment company. All participants are being reimbursed. Marcus got his too." Draven closed his eyes. "So home?" "It's still mine," I said. "But you can live here. And you'll pay rent. You'll work. You'll get your life back on track." "And Marcus?" Draven asked. "Marcus is finished. He got money from federal activities. His investment company is gone. If he wants to do something else, he can. But he's not under your control anymore." Draven looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. "What happened to you, Sophie?" "My girl, what happened?" "Nothing happened," I said. "I just wanted to be the girl who had the last word. And I did." 6 months later, Victoria's trial concluded. 15 years in prison. Most of her associates also surrendered and received sentences. When Thomas had finished his task, he called me. "Sophie," he said, sitting at his desk in the office, "I have to write a report about you, to determine whether or not you were an accomplice." "What's the result?" I asked. "The bottom line is this. You acted unlawfully. But you were also a victim of Victoria, indirectly. And you played a vital role in solving my operation, so I can't explain my decision. But I'm not including you in the same charge." "What do you mean?" I asked. "What I mean," Thomas said, holding my eyes, "is that your case will be closed. Once the investment company operation is over, we'll forget about you. All your transactions at the investment company are erased. The illegal actions against Draven are forgotten. A blank slate." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Why?" "Because," said Thomas, "justice isn't always simple. The investors at the investment firm were all protected thanks to your money. Marcus got all his money back. Draven was able to get his life back. And Victoria, well, nobody was hurt. Justice was simply served. When I left my office, I walked the streets of New York. The city teemed with millions of people below. Most were out of control. Most were powerless. Most were invisible. But it wasn't me. The investment firm's building, I saw Thomas's operation sheets. The entire office was empty. Victoria wasn't there anymore. The partners weren't there anymore. Just empty desks, an empty phone, empty sound systems. As I turned towards the end, Marcus bumped into me. It wasn't noticeable in the crowd, but I saw something in his eyes. Gratitude. And perhaps fear. "Sophie," Marcus said, pausing for a moment. "You saved me. You really saved me." I wanted to answer, but I couldn't find the words. Because I didn't save him. I took revenge. I took control. I took power. And with that power, by chance I saved him, benefiting everyone. And justice was served. But I never had good intentions. Marcus, she left, and I was left alone. On the street in New York. I walked home, drawn by the wind. My home, not Draven's, mine. When I entered the door, Draven was sitting in the living room, reading a newspaper and drinking tea. A simple life. The life of a man who had lost control. He didn't pay attention to me. I remained invisible. But this time, invisibility wasn't a choice. This time, invisibility was discipline. The highest form of power. When I went into my room, I closed the investment company file on his desk. I destroyed all the evidence. I deleted all the documents. Thanks to Thomas's suggestion, there would be no trace left. Looking out the window, the city was sparkling with lights. Millions of people through their windows, searching for strength in their own lives. I found it. I found it in the shadows. I found it by remaining invisible. And now, it controls the power, withdrawn, silent, waiting for the outcome. Because justice is always served by those who remain silent. Initially, everyone was silent. This silence was perceived as a compromise. But in reality, it wasn't. The silence stemmed from indecision. Indecision delayed the steps. Delays reduced opportunities. Reduced opportunities created pressure. Pressure hardened reactions. Hardened reactions led to conflict. Conflicts made the solution more difficult. As the solution was delayed, the problems grew. Growing problems tired the process. Tiredness reduced attention. Mistakes increased. And the balance shifted completely. 6 months later, though it was all in the past, the night still woke me up. In my dreams, Victoria's eyes were looking at me. She was sitting at her desk in her office, greeting me, laughing. "Now, Lysandra," she said. "Welcome." That dream was more terrifying than reality. In my New York apartment, right in the center, on the top floor, with glass walls and control, everything under control, Sophie Hendricks was no longer invisible. In fact, he was never invisible. I was simply ignored by people who didn't want to see me. Draven went home to work. I sat in my office reading financial reports. After the investment firm closed, most clients had canceled their accounts, but Victoria's assets hadn't been fully distributed yet. The federal government was redistributing confiscated assets to non-taxpayers, victims, and investors, but one considerable sum was still missing: $7 million in the investment company's deepest accounts, left over from Victoria's personal owner. And I found that money. When I called Thomas, there was a long silence. "Sophie," Thomas said, his voice heavy on the phone, "why are you calling me?" "There are $7 million, I said, "in Victoria's secret accounts. The federal government doesn't know, but I do." "How do you know?" Thomas asked. "Because I said, control the entire network of the debt fund. I track every single transaction, every single money transfer, every single hidden carrier of the investment company. My power doesn't come from my invisibility. My power comes from information." Thomas heard a voice behind him as he asked something. "Sophie, what are you going to do with this money?" "I'll tell you," I said, "but I have a choice to make, and that choice is mine alone." When I met Thomas behind closed doors, I made my intentions clear. "I'll use these $7 million of Victoria's," I said, "to distribute to all the victims of the investment company." Thomas raised his eyebrows. "Sophie, some of this money belongs to the state." "But most of them," I said, "were ordinary people. Retired doctors, workers, families. Victoria deceived them. I will save them." "It's illegal," said Thomas. "But it's true," I replied. Thomas's face took on a confused expression. I knew he knew what to do, but he couldn't do it, because I was proposing an operation without the police, to act on my own behalf, and Thomas couldn't support that, officially. "But unofficially, your case is closed," Thomas said slowly. "None of my duties involve watching you, controlling you, not even knowing you." I understood. Thomas wouldn't ignore me. He would set me free. Within 2 weeks, I found all the victims of the investment company. Computer records, police files, banking statements, everything was there. 804 people, 804 families, 804 stories. One of them was a 67-year-old woman. I saw that her name was Helen Rothschild. She had invested $500,000 in an investment company, all of her retirement savings. Now the newspaper was enough to see that she was being prepared to be evicted from her home. The other story is about a father and son. They invested $100,000 to start a company and lost it all. They couldn't launch the company. They became unemployed. The other is a teacher. She paid $50,000 to cover her university tuition, but her daughter dropped out of university. All victims of Victoria's promise. They are all, and I will save them. The account all. I planned the distribution of the $7 million. Helen Rothschild, having invested $500,000, would receive $550,000 back. The father and son would receive $10,000. The teacher would receive $55,000. Each victim would receive slightly more than their loss. But how am I going to get this money to them? Directly to the victims would leave traces. Federal agencies would ask questions. I had to find another way. When I called Thomas again, I offered him an idea. "I want to establish a foundation for the investment company," I said, "to support victims of fraud. Maps, legal representation, financial advice, all victims will receive free services." When Thomas prepared this, he remained silent. "Sophie," he said, "who was founding this foundation?" "An anonymous benefactor," I said. "Bonnie doesn't want to reveal their name. They just want to help the victims. And this anonymous benefactor," Thomas said insightfully, "is using the $7 million in Victoria's accounts?" "Absolutely not," I said. "This money comes from legal sources. It's from the donor's own savings." Thomas shook his head. "Sophie, I can't explain this, but I won't keep your file, and I won't ask about the source of the money in your foundation. I'll just say that if I help the victims, it will be to your goal." The foundation was established within 30 days. The president is Tom. He was represented by a philanthropic actor named Bradley. Tom was an actor I funded, but I made all the decisions. The first victim was Helen Rothschild. If the name wasn't in the database, the address was. A check was sent to her home in writing, $500,000. Along with the letter was the foundation's offer. Helen later wrote a letter. It was published in the newspaper. I lost my investment company. I thought my life was over. The company saved me. $500,000 allowed me to pay for my son's college expenses. If there is no justice for me, perhaps there is self-justice. Other victims received similar checks. Newspapers ran headlines such as, "Mysterious Foundation. Fraud victims scammed millions." Federal agents began investigating the source, but Thomas kept the files quiet. But no power is infinite. 2 months later, I learned that a man was waiting for me in his office. Marcus's former investor, Richard Cromwell, one of the directors of the investment firm. He's still free. He's still not releasing any files. When I walked into his office, Richard was sitting at his desk. Dark eyes, the demeanor of a dangerous man. "Sophie Hendricks," said Richard, smiling. I know you very well." My heart raced. There was no way out. How? "Because," Richard said, turning on the screen behind him, "I'm also tracking the investment company's money, and all the money was supposed to be tracked to your funds. But I saw that $7 million is missing, nowhere. It's outside the control of the federal government. It's just being distributed to the victims through a foundation." I tried to hide my silence, but I failed. "I'm asking you," Richard said, smiling. "Did you establish this foundation and keep it a secret? Or is there someone else involved? If you need to find it, you'll find it," I said calmly. "No," said Richard, standing up. "I have an offer for you. The investment company still has assets that are open. $8 million. In offshore accounts hidden. Your available funds have the ability to track this money. I want you to go find this money and bring it to me." "And in exchange for what?" I asked. "In return," said Richard, "I won't say anything. Not about your foundation. Not about your anonymous philanthropy. Just keep quiet. And you bring me $8 million. The bad news is, Richard had a guy he could find. The investment firm's accounts are deeper than I thought. If Richard hadn't mentioned the offshore assets, I would never have found them. But he did. And I had a choice. When I called Thomas, I explained the situation. "Richard," said Thomas, upon learning the name of one of his managers, "is a man I've been watching. But there's no proof, just suspicion of complicity. He wants $8 million from me," I said. "He wants me to find and bring him the investment company's hidden assets." "You can't," said Thomas. "That's a crime." "But you can't do that," I said. "Federally. But I can. In the shadows. Without anyone knowing." Thomas's silence, his respect. When I went after the $8 million, I used my power. My loan funds covered the entire network of the investment company. Offshore accounts, shell companies in Panama, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. It was all interconnected. It was all under Richard's control. I found the money within 10 days. Now the choice was mine, to give the money to Richard or to hand it over to the police. When I returned to Richard's office, there was another person there, Thomas. Richard's face turned pale. "Thomas," he said, "there's no reason for federal agents to arrive this early." "Sophie," Thomas said, looking at me, "did you say that?" "No," I said. "But it was you. I knew you could come." Richard panicked and tried to escape. But the door was already locked. Thomas pulled his hand away and grabbed Richard. After the sound of the handcuff, the security guards arrived. "Richard Cromwell," Thomas said, reading the summons. "You are under arrest. Federal fraud, money laundering, and criminal complicity." When Richard was helped to his feet, he looked at me. "You did this to me. You punished me. What more do you want?" I wanted to answer, but the words weren't there. Because I didn't really know what I wanted. Justice, revenge, control, or just to escape invisibility? After Richard left, Thomas confronted me. "This is the end," Thomas said seriously. "Sophie, this operation is over. Richard is under arrest. The investment company is closed. Victoria is in prison. The partners have been sentenced. The victims have received their money back. And you will no longer be the leading lady in their eyes." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean," Thomas said, "I'm closing your case at federal court. No charges, no assignments, no files. You're completely free. But this is the last time you'll be part of the operation." I took a breath. "Thomas, No," said Thomas. "Don't tell me I know. You were never well-intentioned. You wanted revenge. You wanted power. And you wanted control. You got it, all of it. Victoria went to jail. The investment company is closed. The victims were rescued. And now you own life. All right, Draven and Marcus. I asked. They will live their lives, said Thomas. Draven is your tenant. Marcus is finding himself. Both are grateful to you. But neither will know the truth. Neither will understand your power. And perhaps that is for the best. After Thomas left, I sat by the window. New York below shimmered with lights. Millions of people going about their lives, most seeking power, most seeking control. But none will find the power of knowledge. I found him. A year later, Fraud the Recovery Foundation has already raised $50 million. Thanks to philanthropists, 2,000 victims have received compensation. Universities have been established. Lawyers have been hired. Seminars have been held for victims of fraud. My name was nowhere to be found. Draven was still living at home. He was working. A simple life. Marcus, on the other hand, had transformed. He'd found a new job. A real income away from the investment firm. Loud, happy, and alone. My apartment, however, is still right in the center. Glass walls, control, and privacy. Only Thomas knew the number on the phone line. And he only calls rarely. I had chosen to live in the shadows. I had chosen to be invisible. But this time the choice was mine. Not a necessity. If someone asked me, Sophie, do you regret it? It would be difficult for me to answer. Empathize with the victims of the investment company. Yes, but is there any federal angle left to save them? No. When I used my own power, when I took the illegal route, I became a criminal too. But perhaps justice sometimes comes through illegal means. Perhaps the highest form of power is silence. Perhaps no revenge is perfect, but the one that causes the least damage is chosen. Draven's house. I decided to conduct one final experiment. To Draven. Dad, I want to tell you something. Draven looked up from his desk. The investment company, I said, was a scam. Victoria Ashford tricked the victims. Marcus's money was going to be lost. But I saved him. I went to the police. I supported the operation, and Victoria went to jail. Draven's face was one of shock, then discomfort, and finally, an expression that looked apologetic. I don't know what to say to you, Draven said. Don't say anything, I said. Just the house isn't yours anymore. It's mine, but you can live here. Pay rent, live here, don't punish your life, because I punished you. But now, the punishment is enough. Tears welled up in Draven's eyes. Why, he asked. Because I said, justice is not one-sided. Justice is not black and white. Justice is sometimes gray, sometimes gentle, sometimes it is forgiveness. I went into his room. On his desk were all the files. The investment company, Richard, Victoria, Marcus, Thomas, Draven, they were all in the system. All in the archives. All in the past. When I burned the files, the ashes were carried away by the wind. I destroyed the documents. I erased the evidence. The history is over. But the memory would remain. When I stepped out the window, the city was lit up again. Millions of people, millions of stories. Millions of revenge, millions of justice, millions of silence. I've lived through all of it. And I felt like I had to be able to escape being all of it at once. Invisible, powerful, observant, controlling. But it won't always be the case. Because I am Sophie Hendricks said, from now on, I will always be in control. I will remain silent. I will continue to observe. Because that is my nature. That is my power. And that is my choice. Salvation sometimes comes from ceasing to exist. Sometimes it comes from nothingness. And perhaps I felt most free when I was nothing, controlling everything. I switched off the apartment light. In the darkness, there were only the city lights. And I waited there, silent, powerful, and never to be seen. Because control never ends. It just takes a different form. At this point, it was impossible to draw a single conclusion from what had happened. Because every detail was a reflection of what had come before. Some truths were obvious. Others could only be understood as time passed. Therefore, instead of making hasty decisions, it was necessary to evaluate the process as it was. Looking back, it became clear that moments that weren't immediately apparent were actually decisive. Small choices had a greater impact than expected. Unspoken points left more lasting marks than spoken words. Not everything was resolved through discussion. Some issues remained unresolved. As time went on, reactions changed. Initial emotions gave way to a calmer perspective. This perspective didn't mean approving of everything. It simply meant seeing things as they were, neither diminishing nor exaggerating. Not every story ends with a definitive conclusion. Some stop at a certain point. This story stopped right there, without drawing a sharp line, but without losing its meaning. The impact of what happened was silent, but it was lasting.